Nurse here. Had a 700 pounds woman come in with a broken femur. She had wet the bed, and when we went to clean her up, she had this stuff encrusted all over her crotch, thighs, and folds. It looked like if you were to cut up wet cardboard into confetti-sized pieces, in addition to the typical beige fungus that grows in the folds of very large people who cannot clean themselves, nor have someone taking care of them. She smelled like a mix of sweat, rotting fish, and cat piss. It actually stung my eyes. Myself and the tech had to step away from the job for a few minutes to gather ourselves. Hairstylist here. I see a lot of questionable things in regards to hygiene, maintenance, and standard upkeep. The first few times I heard that you just got out of the gym and you're sweaty, I thought it was gross and kind of rude, but hey, it's just sweat. Let's wash that mop. On that note, a lot of people have dandruff and most of you have pimples on your neck. Sorry if you didn't know, and I've seen more than enough greasy hair to last me a lifetime. I'm not exactly squeamish. But there was one client who made me want to drop my shears and never look back when I parted their hair and there was mold growing on their scalp. This person never washed their hair and kept it in a ponytail all the time. Nope. There were not enough showers in the world after seeing that. I used to work in a clinic that did IV treatments all day, so I've seen some grossness. A big problem with a lot of patients was just not bathing, usually because they were too sick or weak, so you couldn't really blame them. But the body odor combined with the odor of chronic illness was hard to stomach. A sickly sweet smell and a sort of greasy waxy quality to their skin. We also had a woman who treated her illness at home by drinking colloidal silver. Her skin was blue, head to toe. We had one patient who would wet himself every single time he came in. He was old and had dementia and couldn't help it. We weren't grossed out, just felt very bad for him. His wife would always drop him off and leave and refuse to stay with him to help him. I am a barber in NC. As a barber in North Carolina you get used to very stinky greasy people. You power through and collect your $12. The worst case I ever had was actually in barber school. A lady came in once, brought in by a hospital, to get her head shaved. She had been bedridden for 2 years and her son was taking care of her. He had actually just been showing up to collect her disability and keeping her barely alive. Another family member that shopped for her tried to buy groceries to bring to her son and the card was declined. She was curious to why, so she went to the house of the lady and found her in horrible conditions. Covered in poop, grown into the bed, hair one giant dreadlock, and open sores. She called the police and the son was arrested. They brought her to the hospital, which was beside my barber school, to get medical attention. Once they cleaned her up a bit, they brought her to school for a haircut. She entered the school on an IV drip and had 2 nurses with her. In school you are on a rotation, so what comes in is yours. It was my turn. So the lady is assigned to me and another girl. You could smell this lady as soon as she walked in. She looked like the hospital cleaned her up as best they could. The lady's hair is so bad she actually gets assigned 2 students. So me, being as professional as possible, brought the lady back to my station and sat her down. The other student came over and had a terrified look on her face. I struck up a conversation with the lady and she told me about the last 2 years of her and told me to just buzz her head. We put on gloves and proceeded to try and shave her head. The clippers I was using were Oster 76s and they are powerful. They were not powerful enough, they bogged down and cut only a few hairs. So I pulled out my trusty shears and cut off the massive dread holding us back. That smell was the second worst smell of my life. I kept calm and ignored it as best I could, rubbing aftershave under my nose to hide the odor. The girl helping me instantly started to vomit and had to walk away. Other students were vomiting too and half our clients left the building. The woman started crying. I assured her it was okay, and that they just had weak stomachs. I dropped the dread on the ground and went back for my clippers. I stood behind the chair and went to start the buzz cut. That's when I noticed a nest of maggots in her hair. I looked on the ground and bugs were crawling out of the dread. I quickly swept it up and retrieved a hazard bag from one of the nurses. I cleaned the bugs out of her hair and was finally able to buzz it. The woman was very nice and in very good spirits most of the time, minus the one. I then offered her a free shampoo and conditioner treatment for dry scalp, on the house. She accepted and the treatment got rid of most of the foul odor that was emanating from the lady. I also gave her a free facial and massage. She once again started crying, but this time it was because she was so happy. This was the last step in her feeling like a human again. Her son was put in jail, but I don't know for how long. It was a terrible, disgusting day, but it had a happy ending. I like story time. I was working at a mission clinic. I'm not a drive, I was just helping, holding this, grabbing gauze, etc. We would have to remove some botfly larvae from people every now and then. That wasn't that bad until a family brought their father in. He was in his late 60s and was in the early stages of dementia. The family told us he had started wandering off recently, and when they would find him, he would always be naked. He said he just wanted to be naked, like it was nothing. So the family explained that he wasn't feeling well and they found him in the woods again, and that's when they saw his really swollen sack. They brought him in and there he sits. It was pretty gross but also really cool. They have these little hooks that make it really hard to just pull them out. The doctor numbed him up and just started to take them all out. Massage therapist here. So many things. 2 months ago one of my clients had a small tail. It was a couple's massage and it was pretty hard to stay mature about it and not want to get in for a closer peek. A couple of months ago I massaged a man with a cyst on his back and it ruptured all over my forearm as I steamrolled through his back. The smell was somewhere around death and rotten cheese. I have a semi-regular client who has so much hair on his body and wants such deep pressure that no matter how much oil or lotion I use it always gives me rug burn, and I have even found his hair in my mouth and on my face. Bodies are weird. While I have many disgusting stories over the course of a decade as a hairdresser, this one is probably by far the worst. One night about 30 minutes before closing time at a popular chain salon, an extremely homeless-looking man walks into the salon waiting room muttering to himself and pacing around. I ask him if I can help him with anything. He blurts out that he needs a haircut and then abruptly leaves the salon minutes after I put him onto the waiting list. It didn't appear that he would be coming back. Later on in the evening, my fellow stylist and I begin to start cleaning the salon to close it down as it's about 5 to 10 minutes before closing. To our surprise, the same disheveled-looking man walked back through our door looking even more haggard and acting extremely odd. It was apparent that he had puked on his shirt and all over his beard. He reeked of booze and body odor from not bathing. Without even having a chance to address him, he took it upon himself to sit in my chair and demanded that I cut his hair. I could tell by the belligerent way he was acting that he might get violent or out of hand if I refused. It was our store policy to not refuse customers anyway, and since it was only me, I'm a small-bodied female, and another stylist in the salon, I figured the best course of action was to cut his hair really fast and just get him out the door. He stunk so bad that I took him back to the shampoo bowl to start washing his hair. I figured since he lived a harsh life on the streets that I was doing him a decent service. It took several shampoos to get his hair clean. While I was shampooing him, he claimed that he was a millionaire with a mansion, and owned a high-ranking winery. He said he was extremely rich and the only reason he was getting his haircut was because of his upcoming court date. I only believed the court date part of his delusions of grandeur stories. Once I got him in my chair, I proceeded to give him a very nice haircut in record time. Mind you, his beard, face and clothing was still covered in puke. I took the cape off of him and got ready to cash him out, and he asked me one extra favor before he left. He wanted his beard, that was encrusted in puke, cut off. I carefully explained that I was just a hairdresser and under our state law, only barbers could cut facial hair. It was a total BS lie, but there was no way in hell I was going to run my clippers over a bunch of vomit. Upon hearing the bad news, the homeless man flipped out and proceeded to scream profanities at me and the other stylist in the salon. He started kicking my chair and demanded that I cut his beard or he was not leaving the salon. After about 5 minutes of his crazy tirade, my fellow stylist got brave enough to call the police. Just as he saw her pick up the phone, he got up, threw $10 in my face, and peeled out of the parking lot in a beat-up white pickup. Weeks later I was reading the local newspaper, and because I had managed to remember his first and last name plus the name of his supposed winery, I happened upon an article about him. Turns out that police had found him dead in his house of an apparent alcohol overdose combined with a long untreated illness. I guess he really did own a well-known local winery after all, and he was quite well off. Didn't make him any more or less of a nutcase though, and he's on the top of my list of nastiest haircuts ever. I do full body waxing for women, and my most popular service are Brazilian waxes. Now, you see your fair share of weird stuff, but I'll admit that for the most part people are hygienic. Thankfully. The most common things I encounter are slight odors or occasional poop that was missed in a butthole, but nothing prepared me for this one client that I had recently. First off, this woman was not my regular client but had been at my job before to see another waxer. No big deal. I go through my whole speech I do, while she undresses so that I could find out what exactly she wanted and what her history was like. She claims that she's a baby with pain. I'm used to this, so no big deal. Then, she advises me to place a few extra paper towels below her on a table because she has a bladder problem and sometimes leaked when a strip was pulled. Okay. Normally, the ladies I work with would refuse service, but I felt really bad and didn't want to insult her, so I got to it. Number 1, she was terrible with the pain and had an insane amount of overgrowth. I could deal with that until enough bush was removed to get hit in the face with this smell. It was an odor like nothing else. It smelled very, very strongly of urine, that was really old and concentrated mixed with vagina. It nearly knocked me off my feet. Add to this the fact that her genitals were actually stained from urine. In all honesty, I should have discontinued her service for my own well-being and sanitary purposes, but I forced myself to finish and get her out. When she got up, I saw her leakage. It looked like watery mustard and I had to try very hard not to gag and run screaming. After all this, she says, "Your tip is included in the price, right?" I said no, and she says "Effin' thieves," and leaves. It took hours to get the stench out of my nose and I had to thoroughly sanitize my room. Body piercer here. The only thing I've seen so far after 3 years in my line of work was a girl with warts all over her junk. She had them literally everywhere, on her vag, on her butthole, all over her legs and butt cheeks. I just couldn't understand how she would let it get that out of control. There are things out there to help control or get rid of warts, but this girl seemed like she just didn't care. I had to do pedicures when I was in beauty school, and there were so many old ladies who came in and had toe fungus, and couldn't reach their toes to cut their nails, so we had to do it. It looked like cottage cheese stuck between their toes and nails, and sometimes it was just impossible to trim and make them look nice. I remember chunks of fungus flying out when I scraped their toes, and it landed on my face and hair. We couldn't turn them down, and I swear they knew that, so they took advantage of it. They should have just seen a doctor instead of having some poor girl scrub their disgusting feet. A good friend of mine owns a beauty place that's right next to a gym. It's not so much stuff on people's bodies, but people maybe not considering hygiene. A regular thing is that people will go for a massage or a wax directly after they've been to the gym. Massage isn't too bad, she said, but she was saying that depending on the area she's having to wax, it can be pretty unpleasant to do after someone's been for a workout and not showered after. Body odor's not just from your armpits, you know? She's also had ladies come for waxes when Aunt Flo has been in town. This in itself isn't a problem, although you'd probably want to avoid it. You'd be more sensitive in those parts, since sometimes these things happen unexpectedly. The problem arises if the lady doesn't tell her first. She's had a few situations where she's waxed and the tampon string has caught too, meaning she comes away with more than just a wax strip and some hair. Registered nurse here. I was walking my friend through a male Foley cathedral insertion on a pretty unwell guy. She's all prepped up and ready with sterile gloves. It's my job to retract the penis foreskin and hold it up. I peel back the foreskin and all this smegma just flakes out. It's everywhere, disgusting smelly blobs of the stuff all over the head and underside of his penis. We spent about 10 minutes cleaning it all off before we could actually count the penis as clean. You could smell it from a foot away. This was a 60-plus-year-old, uncircumcised man with like 4 adult children who had no idea about cleaning his penis. Doctor here. Worst I've seen, 400 pounds woman who had an anal fistula, fancy word for little extra butthole, that had to be drained twice a day. It was so bad I had to hold my breath. And I couldn't for the love of God understand how her husband said he hadn't noticed that this was happening, because this doesn't happen overnight. So bad that her roommate in the hospital had a diabetic foot and still struggled to walk out of the room. Horrible smell/sight. Awful 24-hour shift, did it 3 times. I do hair and nails at an upscale salon, and there's 2 people I remember just because they were gross. First one was a haircut client. I washed her hair and started cutting it. I noticed a weird mole on top of her head, but I wasn't going to point it out or ask about it because I figured it was something she may be insecure about. It was weird looking because the skin around it was all pink and the mole was about 1 centimeter in diameter and it was a whitish color. So after I'm done with the cut, I start the blow dry. I get to the top section and the mole is gone. There's a pink spot on her head and no mole. I don't know where it went. But I half-assed the rest of that stuff and sent her on her way before I puked. The second was a pedicure client. She was pretty old. I had her soak her feet and then I get started. The first foot I pulled out, she had a big blister on the outside of her baby toe. I asked if it was painful and she said no, it was old and healed up. She said she went on a wine tasting and wore new shoes and got terrible blisters on both feet and was waiting for them to heal before she got a pedicure. The other foot comes out. And oh my God, Her entire pinky toe is a old nasty flap of dead blister skin. At this point it's like flapping around because it's been soaking for 20 minutes. So I take my foot file and run it over the nasty flap of soggy dead skin, and the entire outer layer of skin off her baby toe flops off onto the floor. I gagged.